Welcome to the webinar. And I am sure you have found the title of the webinar very interesting and challenging as well. We are talking in terms of future challenges need social science response more than ever before. The point is that if you have an understanding of the flow of history that happened over the last 200 years, it is often being said that human history has been moving at a breakneck speed, at a high level of acceleration. And every 5 years or 10 years, we find that some fundamental changes have been happening in the way we live, in the way we move forward.
बढ़िया है। एक छोटी सी इशू है कि हमारा वेबिनार हो रहा है अभी 3 बजे, तो दो लोगों को मिलिंदो और सर मिलिंदो और सर सुदर्शन। मिलिंदो को लॉग इन उनका तो शुरू हो गया।
फंडामेंटल प्रॉब्लम है
सही वो अपने लिंक क्लिक कर रहे हैं तो गो टू वेबिनार का वो खुलता है कि योर वेबिनार इज ओपन नाउ, फिर बंद हो जाता है। तो उसके लिए क्या सॉल्यूशन है? कोई फायर फाइटिंग क्या कैसे उसको कैसे करें?
There are some sound coming from the outside. But the point that I am trying to make is that we are moving at a very fast rate. We are developing at a very fast rate. But simultaneously, the problem that we are facing is that the uncertainties in life.
बहुत बड़ी दिक्कत है। कोई आईटी वाला कोई बंदा है, तुम बात कर सकते हो, कुछ थोड़ा गाइड कर दो यार।
Our advancement is creating uncertainties about future. And if I am to consider the future challenges, the challenges are in terms of taking care of these uncertainties. What should we do and how to take care of the uncertainties? The uncertainties are getting created fundamentally because of the fact that when we are moving forward in terms of technology, in terms of our understanding of how of what we require further, our innovations are taking us to a newer heights. But the moment we are having a new innovation, often because of the speed that we are using to get innovations effective, we are not often taking care of the possible implications of the innovations per se. We are often one-tracked in getting the benefit out of the innovation, getting benefit out of the changes, but we are often oblivious of what possible sorts of negative impact those changes may be having on us. And that is creating a lot of uncertainties in our future, and we have been facing it in several ways. Say, for example, we are talking about fourth industrial revolution, where we are moving from the era of mass production to an era where we are talking in terms of technology influencing our consumption pattern. And we are using everything from our daily codes to even industrial production into putting them into the process of automation and machines taking care of all these processes. This is an advancement, no doubt. We are increasing our so-called standard of living. We are having an improved quality of living for all of us. But there are concerns coming up that if all activities and all processes that we are engaged in get automated, then what is going to happen to those who were using their labor power in running these processes so far? Maybe they were running it at a lower level of quality, a lower level of efficiency, but they were also earning their livelihoods out of these processes. One may argue that, well, we are having a higher level of life and everybody would be joining and everybody will be a part of it. But the point is that whenever you are having a change, you will find history says that there is a set of losers and there is a set of gainers. And we always believe that any change would lead to a situation where the number of gainers will be more than the number of losers, and so the society gains as a whole. But this argument sometimes get upside down, because in the reality it is found that the number of losers sometimes turn out to be more than the number of gainers. And in this context of this webinar, I am now in a position where I am going to gain much with Professor Sudarshan coming into the picture. He is being seen now. I hope he can hear me as well. Is it? Sudarshan, can you hear me? Well, he is yet to be audible. So this is the challenge that we have. We are moving at a speed without considering the future implications of the changes that we are bringing in. And this lack of consideration for future impacts is the real challenge that we are facing in social science from the perspective of social science today. And social science has to be effectively utilized to help us face the challenges that are coming up. What may be the reason? Why? How do we argue? And why do we argue that social science has the methodological edge in helping us facing the challenges created? If you have a look at the methodologies of social science on the one hand and physical science on the other hand, there is one level of similarity between them. Both of them are identified as science. But there is a dissimilarity between them when we distinguish them to be social and natural or physical science per se. What is the fundamental difference? If you have a look at the methodological approaches followed by natural science and followed by social science, both of them are science in the sense that both of them carry out some experiment in a repetitive manner. They observe as to what are the results of the experiments and then come to a conclusion about the possible result which will occur if the experiment is carried out in the future. And both of these sciences follow this fundamental method of scientific inquiry, and that's why both of them are identified as science. But how are they different? They are different from a very, very important and fundamental perspective. The difference lies in the fact that in social science, in physical science, or in natural science in that sense, we are under an impression that under same conditions, an experiment will lead to the same result. And as a result, if the observations are identical while you are carrying it out under same conditions, then you can predict as to what would be the result of the experiment. But unfortunately or fortunately, in case of social science, the situation is challenging. You don't know what is going to be the result of the experiment for sure. And there are possibilities that the results will vary across experiments carried out more or less in the same condition, only with some changes in the individuals. So the fundamental difference is that in social science we deal with human beings, whereas in physical science we deal with inanimate objects. And we can predict the behavior of the inanimate objects quite clearly, but it is difficult to predict the behavior of an individual beforehand. But we use some qualitative and quantitative methods in social science to identify or to predict to some degree or to some degree of confidence that what can be the possible result of it. Now, try to understand the basic fundamental difference between these two approaches of science. When we are carrying out social science, physical science, in the context of present day understanding of research, there is hardly any interaction between social scientists and the physical and natural scientists. And there is a huge knowledge gap which exists between the domain of the physical science and the social science in terms of the interaction between actions at these two levels. So when we are having technologies, when we are having, say, technologies in the sense of taking control over the nature, often we don't inquire as to what is going to be the impact of those technological changes or innovations on the nature itself. This has led us to the fundamental problem that we have been facing in the context of climate change and global warming. Professor Sudarshan, would you like to join in now?
Okay.
Am I audible to you?
Yes. Okay, thanks. Okay, carry.
So now we have Sudarshan with us, and I think as I was talking to you about the gainers and losers of technology, because of technology we are losing him. Now because of technology we have gained him into the process. And I would request Sudarshan to get into the to take the floor and initiate his discussion.
Well, very good. I'm sorry for this slight hitch. I hope you can all hear me now. I'm very excited about the new program that we are launching that we've called the BA Social Science and Policy. You know, we are a school of government and public policy, and we have a very strong economics program, by the way. And our economics program is also a program that's innovative in that it has some of the philosophy that led to the start of a new program in social science and policy. The economics program is really meant for students who have some idea that they want to be on top of this particular discipline. A large number of students may not have made up their minds whether they should study political science or psychology or sociology or economics, but are interested in the social sciences generally, and they're interested in understanding how human beings relate to society around them. So we've been thinking about the nature of social sciences as it is now. In most universities, you have these different departments: political science, sociology, psychology, and economics, of course. And there's little interaction amongst them. Now, this is unfortunate, and we are realizing it all the more now because the world has so rapidly changed that you need insights from a number of these disciplines to get a more rounded grasp. So we are somewhat in a situation of, you know, the famous Indian fable of the 6 blind men who tried to describe an elephant. and each person caught hold of one part of the elephant. The one who got the trunk said the elephant is, of course, like a tree. And the one who got the tail said, oh, it's like a snake, because none of them had the opportunity to see the whole picture, the elephant in the room, so to speak. So one of the unfortunate consequences of dividing up the social sciences into distinct disciplines and awarding degrees in them has been an unfortunate narrowing of the grasp that we need to have to meet contemporary challenges in the world. We need a more rounded, a more holistic picture. And after all, you have the basic comparison between natural science and the social science. Social science has to do with how human beings relate to society and to other human beings. And natural sciences study the natural phenomena, the world around, nature, the planets, the universe, those that are not particularly fixated on human beings, but are fixated on birds, animals, everything around us. But the social sciences focus on human beings. And we wanted to start a new exciting program, which we are calling in the singular, social science and policy, because we want to draw insights from a number of these social science disciplines: economics, politics, sociology, psychology, and now, very importantly, demography. Demography is the study of the population and population groups and different age groups within the population, their characteristics, and so on. And also in our country, concerns or problems such as why there are fewer girl children being born compared to what there ought to have been had it been a natural process. So these are the elements that we wish to bring into our new program. And this is really designed to address challenges that we are going to face in the world, particularly starting with the challenges posed by this particular pandemic, which forces us to have conversations of this kind. The pandemic itself is a situation where we need to understand social networking. We need to understand how people connect with each other. Now, that knowledge is absolutely vital because we know the virus is capable of transmitting from one person to another. But if we could understand and model how human beings interact with one another, how social networks are formed, who are the key groups in a social network? Not every member of the social network has the same importance. Some members have a greater importance. In a way, they are the leaders. And if we are able to identify them, say, in a scientifically grounded methodology, which there is in network theory, we'd be able to isolate or find out who are the people who are most prone to be able to transmit the virus, and therefore not go for a big solution like locking down everybody, but to be a little more nuanced and precise in how we go about it. That's just a little example of how a broad understanding of social networking, which means economic transactions, social transactions, which means social media related transactions. All of this we need to understand, and for that we need to change the way social science disciplines are organized and taught. And that's the exciting part. And Milindo and I are very excited about this new program because it can deal with all the new problems that we will have, problems that relate to certain industries fading away. The pandemic has already written off a good number of industries, but it's also opened up opportunities for new digital-based work for people, for new kinds of ventures, for a better understanding of our human beings and their impact on climate change, because now that we've cut down human activity, we can see the impact it's having on the environment. And if we make a closer study and have a discipline that enables us to understand that, to make policymakers focus on areas where the impact of shutting down certain kinds of industries, having certain other kinds of industries taking their place, so that we have a win-win situation with respect to both environment and clean air, and climate change, as well as human welfare. That's the ambition. And so we want to start this new program. That doesn't mean those wishing to specialize in political science and economics need not do so, but those who wish to get a more holistic understanding and haven't yet made up their minds as to what it is they want in their future careers, where do they want to go and work, I invite them to pay very close attention to what we are going to offer in the new social science and policy undergraduate program. So I'll stop there, Milindo, and let you pick up a little more because you started off the discussion.
Because
I can't hear you. Milindo?
Now it's unmuted. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I hope everyone.
So now you have absolutely detoured the point that I made before you joined in. What I meant to say that, well, as the history of human being is going through a rapid pace, then we are facing the challenges more because uncertainties in life are increasing, and there is coming out a very, very strong, sometimes I would say, contradiction between the growth in our knowledge in physical and natural science on the one hand, and the knowledge base in terms of social science. And social science also has to play a very, very important role from the perspective that any change in our understanding of physical science is creating some impact on the social system as well. As we introduce new technologies, as we introduce new ideas into our life in terms of certain understanding of the natural processes and the physical processes, be it in terms of electronics or be it in terms of the artificial intelligence and all of them, we are also having a very, very important impact on the social system per se. And that is why Sudarshan rightly made the point very clear that time has today come not to look at a society through different lenses of economics, sociology, or political science. We require some expertise in looking at the society as a whole in its complete representation, which has components of economics, which has components of social theories, social interactions, and which has components of politics as well. Because any one of them cannot go independent of the implications on the other fields of the society. And this is one of the, I would say, gravest mistakes that we tried to develop in the name of specialization in social science. The same issue that Sudarshan raised, that we tried to explain or define an elephant in terms of our own methodological tools, and in the process, we ended up not really being able to define what society really is. Those who are studying economics, for them, society is nothing but the economic system. Those who are looking at sociology, they would like to look at society from that angle only. But if you really get deeper into the process of social science, as I told you right at the beginning, that social science has the challenge in the sense that experiments are not repetitive. Human behavior is not just a function of some economic incentives or some political processes. Both social, political, and economic incentives and processes influence each other, and we get confined into a holistic pattern of a decision-making process. And when we talk about a program in BA Social Science, we are trying to link up the understanding across these three domains, and to make it very clear that none of these domains can stand alone without support from understanding and knowledge from the other. And I would like to extend the argument that Sudarshan gave a little bit further. When we are talking about social science, we are also very keen to know the impact of technological change on the society. So the linkage between natural and social science, I think, is also a very, very important and challenging concept that we have to handle in the days to come. If you talk about the climate change issue, what is that? Some technologies had some implications and impact on the natural system. And while these technologies were invented, they were invented and applied in silos without taking care of how they are affecting the natural system. And if the natural system is affected, then that will also simultaneously affect the social system. And these linkages are also very, very important to be understood in a course on social science and public policy, because we are not just trying to understand why it is happening, but we are also trying to make it a point that what should be our next step to ensure that we are moving towards a better world, we are moving towards a better future. I think Sudarshan may like to join in now, and I'll come in later.
Yes. No, that's absolutely right, Milindo. For some interested students, I would like to draw their attention to the work of a Yale professor called Nicholas Christakis. He wrote a well-known book called Connections. He's a great authority on social networks, and he was actually a medical professional, a natural scientist to begin with. He's now a social scientist, and he wrote a piece in the New York Times some years back with the title "Let's Shake Up the Social Sciences." And the basic point that he makes there is exactly the point that you just made, that the very advances in technology and knowledge that the natural sciences have brought about are posing a challenge to the social sciences. So it is not that the social sciences have not kept pace. He points out that in his field, departments of anatomy, biology, histology, molecular biophysics, those are the new fields that have come. Anatomy, histology have disappeared in studies of medicine. So natural sciences have adapted and have changed to a new knowledge being created. And therefore, we need in the social sciences also an ability and the capacity to integrate knowledge that we've derived, the impact of technology, for instance. So, behavioral economics, for example, uses psychology to radically reshape our understanding of classical economics, which is what it is. So, modern problems that we now have, like chronic illness, energy conservation, this pandemic disease that we have, intergenerational poverty, inequalities between regions, between classes within society, market panics, the behavior of markets with a herd instinct, everybody rushing like lemmings to do the same sort of thing. All of these require a better understanding of the structure and function of human social networks within which individuals function, and individuals also are collectives. So we have to understand that the old distinction between methodological individualism and a structural understanding of society has lost its salience. It's no longer methodological individualism and something more collective. It is much more integrated. It's much more networked now. And so we have to, find new ways of adopting desirable practices. For instance, how do you get people to accept vaccination? Now, you would have thought that the problem is solved because we vaccinated people against smallpox with great effort, a wonderful case study of how that was done. And the last cases were in India, and India was the one that finally brought an end to smallpox in the world. But it's not that the job is over. Nowadays, there are new concerns people are raising about vaccines. They choose to believe that maybe this is not the right thing, maybe this is an interference in the order of nature. So we need to understand what is it that motivates people. Any of these behavior changes that we want. That's why policy is very important, because policy is about bringing about behavior change. So we have these challenges. We have, on the one hand, people following certain faiths believe, for instance, even in the case of this pandemic, they think that total and abject faith in God is essential and decreed by religion. And therefore, if you have complete faith in God, why can't you just leave your faith to God? And why should you behave differently? Why cannot you go and congregate and pray in a mosque during Ramadan, or in a temple during one of the Hindu festivals, or congregate in a sangha as the Buddhists do? Now, how do you get people to understand that behavior is going to be dangerous? Because the fact that it's going to be dangerous is something we know from our knowledge of natural sciences. But how do you make that knowledge of natural sciences change people's behavior in society? Because, see, it's very easy in a way to deal with, for instance, let me tell you a little story to illustrate my point. I was once having a conversation with the late Prime Minister, Mr. Narasimha Rao. At that time, I was working in the Ford Foundation, and we were supporting various small grants for many good things. And they were delayed in clearing in the government. And I asked him for help. And he said, listen, the Ford Foundation helped India with the Green Revolution by educating farmers, by demonstrating in each farmer's field how the new hybrid wheat crop will yield 15 times more grain if they planted it. But they needed to see it to believe that it would happen. So what was done was farmers were allowed to grow whatever seed they wanted, but a small plot in their land was taken in which the new hybrid seed was planted, and they were told when should it be watered, when it would get fertilizer, when it would get pesticides, and it got 15 times the yield. Once the farmers saw that happen, they just took it. They didn't need any more persuading. They were convinced. Now, he said that's easy because the wheat plant behaves like the scientist says it will behave. If you give it water at this time, if you give it fertilizer at this time, if you protect it from pesticides at this time, this is the optimal yield you will get. And that is fairly accurate. But Mr. Narasimha Rao told me, I'll give you a challenge. Why don't you take a district or two and make sure that every child in that district finishes 10 years of schooling without a break? And he said, if you do something like that, then we can replicate it, we can do more things with it. And he pointed out that that's much more challenging than the wheat crop, because the wheat crop behaves as the biologists who have studied it will tell you it will behave. But human beings don't behave in the way our theories about human beings say they will behave, because the very theory is internalized by human beings, and that itself makes them change their behavior in unexpected ways. Which is why when you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with both very predictable features. We all go to sleep and wake up. That's very predictable. But we're also dealing with very essential elements of uncertainty. And this is why a new understanding of how natural sciences impact on human beings and how human beings behave after that, trying to get a grasp of that is a very exciting adventure. It's a process of discovery. Over to you, Milindo.
experiment in terms of if there is any response or any queries from those who are participating. Is it possible, or
yes, they've asked possible to have a question. There's one question about mass unemployment. How does the government keep its aim for development to be sustainable in this context? You both want employment and you want development to be sustainable. How are you going to do that?
That is exactly the point. When we in social science, the social scientists have their own definition of sustainable development, and there is often a conflict between the definition of sustainable development given by the students or the researchers in natural science and in life science or other sciences per se. Because I wrote a piece a long time back where I tried to argue that these two terms, sustainable and development, they appear in the form of an oxymoron. One just negates the other, because our understanding of development is so narrow even today that we cannot think of a so-called sustainable development, because the sustainability term introduces some restrictions on human behavior in terms of their relationship with nature. Whereas when we are talking of development from the perspective of economics, we believe in we have to have unlimited ones in a field of scarce resources. So there are some fundamental philosophical and methodological conflict between the term sustainability, because when you talk to a zoologist or a botanist or a biologist, for them sustainability means that, well, the natural resources or the other living beings are not to be harmed, and they are to be protected, they are to be given complete protection. So there arises a question, a debate, that, well, there is a coal mine field under the forest. If you ask an economist who is interested in development, the economist would say that, well, the mines, the coals cannot be lifted from the mines, have to be lifted from the mines. If you talk to a biologist or a natural scientist, he would say, no, for the sake of sustainability, we cannot lift the coals from out of the mines. And there is a methodological conflict. I am not saying a political conflict, also there is, but I am not saying about that. I am arguing that there is a methodological conflict between natural sciences and the social scientists per se about the use of natural resources. And we also don't know as to how a change in our natural resource use pattern will have a change in our social system. Take the case of the pandemic. It is often being argued by many one of us that, well, the fact that the virus, zoonotic virus, are coming and jumping onto the human bodies is because of the reason that the animals are losing their habitat, and we are coming closer to the animals, and that is creating a possibility of viruses jumping from the animals into the human body, about which the human body is also not physiologically ready to develop the necessary immunity and antibody. So the the point is that when we are talking about sustainable development, both natural and social sciences have to move towards each other. And that is the methodological challenge, that is the knowledge-based challenge as to how we generate the necessary knowledge domain which can help us understand the interaction between nature and human society. And if that is not understood properly, that we won't be able to move towards our objective of sustainable development. Take the second point. When we are talking about sustainable development in terms of the sustainable development goals, what is the ultimate statement? No one is left behind. We don't want anybody to be left behind. And that strikes one of the very fundamental philosophy we follow in both natural and social sciences, that is the survival of the fittest. And there is an apparent conflict between these two. How do we sort of bring about an understanding where, from a perspective of competition, we perhaps have to move towards a perspective of cooperation, which will provide much greater value to the social life as well as to the natural system that we are inheriting from our forefathers, and that's what we have borrowed from our future generation.
Yes, there's a very interesting point that one of the students has made, which speaks to why we are on a new voyage of discovery in the social sciences. Because he says they are social sciences, the theories are generally based on assumptions, and assumptions that limit the study to certain factors arising out of our inability to gauge the impact of all the factors acting as a cause for a particular effect they have. An incomplete formulation of factors leads to inability of theory to explain in certain circumstances. While I agree all factors cannot be included, but psychology, both individual and group, as a scientific study should be a core to social science. How do we design a paradigm to correctly gauge or predict the impact of different social science perspectives, economic, technological, political, on human psychographics? Now, this is exactly the thing. This is
exactly what we have been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very pleased that it's been so well articulated by a student, what you and I have been trying to say, which is that we need to have a new process and a new outlook. See, let's take instead of starting with assumptions like economic theory classically does, or extended to politics, instead of starting with assumptions, we could start with the world as it is, with the real world. Now, in the natural sciences, you go and do work in a laboratory. You go and experiment. Now, what is the counterpart of that in the human world? We should be able to go to, if you want to understand why aren't girl children being sent to school, you need to go and speak to parents in villages where they are not sending the girl child to school. Instead of making various assumptions about what cause for this is the Narasimha Rao problem posed to me. You have to go and talk to them. You may find that it's because there's poor lighting. You may find it's because there are not adequate toilet facilities. You may find because the distance is too much to the school. You may find that there is a particular group of individuals who are a nuisance, who tease these girls when they go to school, any number of factors. But you see, just as in a laboratory, you put different things and you experiment, in the social sciences as well, we must be more in the field than the social sciences have generally tended to do. They've been more taught in a more desk-bound way. And one of the things we like to do is to get our students to go and to be able to communicate with all kinds of people. Now, that itself is an art. And knowledge is not simply that's enshrined in textbooks and published by leading publishers. That is not what qualifies necessarily as knowledge. What a villager has to tell you, a farmer has to tell you, is knowledge that is as valid and important, particularly for our understanding of how to make the social sciences, like the natural sciences, much more useful to human welfare. So what we are here trying to do is to change an institutional apparatus so that we can move away from the old notion that you make certain assumptions. I mean, that's a good technique in a way. I mean, Weber used it. He's a great thinker. He called it ideal types. And you set up an ideal type and you see what would happen to other things given that ideal type and the assumptions of the ideal type being met. And then you try and see what if there are certain changes moving away from the assumptions. So in economics, for instance, there's a very famous theorem, which is Kenneth Arrow's general possibility theorem, which says that if you make some 5 reasonable expectations, you will not get a group decision rule that meets all of these 5 reasonable expectations. And then the way the discipline progressed is ideal type, 5 conditions. Then you relax each condition, and then you see if it's possible to get an equilibrium and an outcome or a group decision rule that satisfies 4 but not 5, or satisfies 3 but not 5. That way. That's one way of doing social science. But another way that we now have to give more importance to is to actually deal with people and groups of people, get a better understanding by being able to, and one of the great advantages that technology makes possible is the internet and the ability to reach and communicate and do surveys with large numbers of people very conveniently. You don't have to, like the old anthropologists did, travel to far off places, spend months living with the people. Technology has made it possible to bring people in a way virtually closer together, and therefore we must take advantage of all of these advantages of technology in advancing the frontiers of the social science so that they can contribute to human welfare, and with all of the new challenges. And the challenges are not going to go away as long as there are people and we're dealing with human beings. We're going to be dealing with very old problems. The problem of discrimination against women is an ancient problem. It was there, Aristotle, who talked a lot about citizenship and the city and the flourishing of a city. In Aristotle's society, women did not count as citizens. There was slavery. So societies, and there are modern types of slavery now around us that we have to discover and deal with. And therefore, perennial problems of human beings, which mean that human beings care for one another, that they have the ability to love, to show empathy, they have the ability to be prejudiced, biased, and hate one another. All of this are part of human nature, and therefore the problems that human beings have are old problems. But the context in which we have to tackle these old problems of human beings so that we can live with one another and contribute to the well-being of one another and leave no one behind requires a new imagination in the study of social sciences, which is what we'd like to do in the new program that we are starting.
So may I join in?
Yes, please.
Or is there any other question? Is
no,
there
so
any other
that was a
question
good
or
formulation.
comment? Yes, that was a very good, and in fact, I am so happy that this young man spoke our mind, and absolutely spot on as to what we were trying to share with you. And the point that you have made is very, very important, that we make too many assumptions, and that leads us to some deviations between what we predict and what we achieve in reality. But if you have a look at the methodological issues or methodological approaches in physical science, you must appreciate that they also make a good number of assumptions. The whole Newtonian mechanics is based on a very, very unrealistic assumption that there is no friction. If he brings in friction into the system, then none of his laws of motion will hold good. And if you have a look at the social system, incidentally, it is being argued by many people now that the social theories are nothing but application of Newtonian mechanics into social science. And whatever you are talking in terms of the failure of the assumptions are nothing but the frictional force that is operating within the social system. So when we are developing a social system, a model of social system, we also assume away the friction per se in the social system, which do not happen in reality. And so the laws of motion that Newton developed would be of no value the moment you bring in the possibility of friction in the context of the interaction between two celestial or physical bodies. So friction is there, then friction will be there. Unfortunately or fortunately for the social scientists, the degree and the varieties of sources of frictions are much higher. And we have to incorporate those possible sources of friction into our system by reducing or by dropping down some of the fundamental assumptions that we begin with. One such important exercise is being done in terms of what is called institutional economics. The economics as it was developed and in the late 50s and early 60s and even later, they believe that there is no role of institutions in an economic system. They try to avoid that frictions from institutions from the economic system. But this friction is unavoidable. There will be. And there were attempts by people to bring in the possibility of the friction in our existing economic system. So some assumptions were dropped, and there arose the subject called institutional economics. There is again the emergence of an area called ecological economics. When economics was developed, or political ecology, when politics was developed, nobody cared for the role of nature or ecosystem in the functioning of a political or a social or an economic system. But now, those assumptions are being taken care of. New fields of politics, new fields of sociology, new fields of economics are emerging where we are trying to drop those assumptions regarding absence of friction. So we are doing that, and that is exactly what we are trying to do while we are trying to design the course framework for BA Social Science and Public Policy. And mind you, perhaps you have noted it, that we have not kept ourselves confined to the understanding of social science. We are extending it to action from our understanding of social science when we talk about public policy. We are not just confining ourselves inside the four walls of the classroom to understand how it works, but also to get a feeling about how to ensure that our knowledge is put into practice through the process of generating the relevant public policy interventions. So it's not just a course or a program on empowering with the theories, but also a course where you will be empowered to identify that what of the assumptions are relevant and what of them are not, and how to take care of those assumptions as well while you are operating at the intervention level.
Milindo, there's another interesting question. There's another one, another comment, which says with the proof that use of big data for individual behavior, ability to impact individuals' choices and behavior. So there's a reference to the role played by Cambridge Analytica in the 2016 elections and the role of Facebook in that. Does this, if the question is, does this open us to designing a completely new social system overall? So based on less choices, etc. And then the critical question is, how do we establish morals in a society in this scenario? So on this, I want to underline that you know, there was a phase in the development of the social sciences where it began with a group of thinkers in France who were called the encyclopedists. And the understanding was that if you understood everything, that you had all the details and you could put together everything, then you could solve most human problems and predicaments, and say what we now consider as moral and ethical problems will simply dissolve. They will not be problems in need of a solution, they would be dissolved. Now, this kind of assumption has proven to be absolutely wrong. And we are now at a phase where we have to go back to what you might regard as some classical virtues. You know, the older thinkers in the East and in the West, the Greek thinkers and thinkers in India, China, have emphasized virtues. Virtues are what? I mean, honesty, courage, compassion, being altruistic. All of these virtues have to be inculcated in people and in society. Now, if you operated on the basis that we are all rational human beings, we are maximizing our utility, and each person is going to try and maximize their own self-satisfaction, you don't leave much room for the development and the nurturing of virtues that are needed in public life and in private life. So this is where the question of how do we establish morals comes in, because I think we've reached a stage where the kind of naive, now known to be naive, assumption that if you addressed every single detail and you made a close study of human beings, just as you study the natural world, we will be able to solve our problems, is not there. We now realize that human beings need to be, their behavior needs to be conditioned into a greater appreciation of what an individual cannot flourish unless the community in which the individual is a part of flourishes. The big lesson of climate change is that none of us on this planet can flourish until we make sure that the entire planet has the chance to regenerate and flourish. So this interconnectedness, and therefore the virtues in our behavior that will make this sustainable, is a big challenge. And it's what education in a way is all about. It's not about what theories you learn and what particular formula you mastered or how many economic trick techniques you can use. It's about what kind of a person you become. Ultimately, that's what education is all about. And we have our mind on that. And therefore, I'm very happy that somebody raised this thing, because ethics and morality are very, very important. And they are not to be taught as some separate, isolated subject. It has to be, in a way, incorporated in our whole epistemology. The way we approach knowledge, having a respect for knowledge is itself a virtue. Respecting knowledge is a virtue that must be cultivated in people. It shouldn't be assumed that it will automatically come because we automatically breathe. You can learn how to breathe properly. You can learn how to learn properly. And therefore, these are the concerns of the time. And I'm very glad that in a way we've ranged on what might seem very broad, challenging, wide philosophical conundrums. At the same time, there is an optimism that with a better synchrony of advances in the natural sciences, we can make the social sciences much more meaningful for us. I'd say that, again, it comes down to human beings. Because no matter what theory you have of how the planets will move, the planets move in the way they move. You cannot influence the planets. But everything that happens around us is a result of human behavior. And human beings influence the earth. Human beings influence the community and one another. And how to make human beings behave better for the welfare of all human beings is really what the quest is all about. And I think that's a lovely note on which I don't see any more questions. But we've had some very thought-provoking comments, Milindo. Don't you think so?
I am very, very happy with the way the younger minds have picked up the real issues that is being faced by all of us. And we have a great responsibility in helping them find the ways out. And we can just play the role of mentors. And I am sure that those of whom who will be joining us in this program will help this human society to move further and move forward in a very positive manner. I would just like to mention one point on the big data that you mentioned that was raised. One point has to be kept very clear, that it does not matter whether you have a huge amount of data or small amount of data. What you have to be very careful about is that data pertains to a particular point of time, and the next point of time, that data may not be relevant in the context of the broader panorama of human behavioral characteristics. So big data is a very important tool, very effective tool, but what you can find out from a set of data collected today may not be realized or may not be true if you analyze some data picked up the next day, because human behavior often changes at a very fast rate. Say, for example, the big data collected just a day before the pandemic, and the big data, a set of big data collected one day after, say, the lockdown, one day before the lockdown and one day after the lockdown, will not give you the same results. That is what I have been finding while I am working on the pandemic data, that every day the curve is changing. And it is very difficult to keep track of the changes that happens, no matter whatever be the quantity of data that you have in your possession. So I would end up here. Over to you, Sudarshan.
Thank you very much. I just have the very pleasant task of thanking the audience and thanking them for some very, very illuminating, deep comments. So it's exactly the kind of students who are capable of making those comments that we'd like, because ours is a collective enterprise of teaching and learning. You know, as a teacher, that you and I learn every day interacting with students. And so it's not the old conventional hierarchical, you know, the teacher knows more, the student has to learn from the teacher. It's a common quest. We are in a common pursuit. And I again would like to underline that consciously make it our goal to leave no one behind, because as human beings, we care for fellow human beings, and therefore we have a mechanism, the Sustainable Development Goals, and we can find various ways in which, in small ways and in big ways, we can collectively contribute to a cause to which the world has signed up. So welcome, come on board. Thank you.
Thank you.
We can leave now.